The focus of this class was the concept of the estate and how it relates to real property. The majority of the class was spent examining the different kinds of estates that can be established. Types of estates can be divided into 4 general categories: freehold estates, non-freehold estates, statutory estates, and concurrent estates. Then we talked about business organizations so we could have a full picture of who can possess estates in land. Estate is a term with many meanings. It can mean a large area of land associated with a manor, or mean the entirety of the assets owned by one person. For a real estate agent, though, the definition of estate that is most relevant is an interest in or a measure of control over a piece of real property. This is also known as an estate in land and is the estate part of real estate. The control that an estate in land carries with it can be visualized as the bundle of rights we've mentioned before. Depending on the arrangement that grants the estate, the bundle of rights can be thick or thin. Sometimes, a person who holds an estate will give rights from their bundle to another person. In this case, the owner of the estate is known as the grantor, and the person who receives rights is known as the grantee. These terms also apply when an estate is transferred, such as through the sale of a property. The person giving away the estate is known as the grantor, and the person gaining the estate is known as the grantee. 2 of the classifications of estates in land are freehold estates and non-freehold estates. Freehold estates almost always include ownership of the property. Non-freehold estates are sometimes known as leaseholds, since they're primarily established by rental or lease agreements. Statutory estates are estates created by state laws in order to protect individuals. Both dower and courtesy, for example, are intended to protect the rights of married spouses. Both of these give a spouse the right to a portion of any family-owned real estate. The idea is that overlapping ownership rights will prevent one spouse from getting rid of a piece of family real estate without involving the other. Concurrent estates, concurrent tenancies, or concurrent ownerships are all terms for properties where there is more than one person with a share of interest in the property. Joint estates are concurrent estates where the members of the arrangement have equal shares of the interest in the property. Tenancy by the entirety is a particular form of joint estate between a legally married couple that carries with it an additional condition. Neither spouse can transfer away the share of the interest in the property without the other's consent. Both joint tenancy and tenancy by the entirety grant the right of survivorship. This means that when one member of this kind of arrangement dies, the share of the interest in the property is automatically and equally transferred to the remaining members. The other kind of concurrent ownership is a tenancy in common. Tenancies in common don't have an even distribution of the interest in the property. Neither do they have restrictions on the ability of members to transfer a share of the interest in the property to another person. Finally, tenancies in common do grant the right of survivorship. Michigan's specific rules for estates in land and tenancies of title are found in Michigan Compiled Laws, Chapter 554. These vary little from what we've already discussed. As noted, estates can be held by more than just individuals. Partnerships allow 2 or more people to share the profits and losses of a business venture. Common forms of partnerships include general, limited liability, and joint ventures. Each kind of partnership has its own strengths and drawbacks. An alternative to this is the corporation. This kind of organization is owned by the people who buy stock in the corporation, called stockholders. Corporations create liquid assets in the form of stocks and provide some protection from liability for their stockholders. Limited liability companies are another alternative. LLCs require less formal organization than corporations while protecting their members from liabilities incurred by the LLC. We've now covered both the property and the estate part of real estate. While interconnected, each aspect has its own features that need to be understood to understand the whole. Now that we have a good idea of what we're working with, we can move on to what it takes to transfer ownership of real estate from one person to another. Thank you for choosing At Your Pace Online.